Hello there. Control your insolence and concentrate. It's time for Most Things Kenobi.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Most Things Kenobi, a podcast about Obi-Wan Kenobi and all things Star Wars. I'm your host, Leanne.
And I'm your host, Lauren.
And this episode, we actually went to our patrons and we asked them, what's an Obi-Wan related topic that you would like us to cover? And we got several, which we will be using in future episodes. Mm-hmm. But the one we chose for today was to have a discussion about Obi-Wan's famous line of when he was talking to Luke in the original trilogy, and he said, from a certain point of view. He gave Luke that explanation as to the that he kept from Luke about Darth Vader. And this is an interesting topic because I don't know that there's a right or wrong dissection of this line, why it was chosen, why it was given to this character to say. So we're just going to have a little chat about it and what we think.
It's very polarizing, I've realized. People feel pretty strongly. Like, I just did a quick search for some articles, and people have feelings about this. Our patron kind of asked us to defend it a bit, and I think it'll be interesting to look at both sides, because my default was always to kind of be bothered by it. I was always bothered by it.
Yeah. I can see that, though. I can see why anyone would be bothered by it, including Luke.
Yeah, it's kind of a big deal. Most people are not nice about it.
Well, no, I get that. I can try and defend it because I too have thoughts about both sides of this argument of should Obi-Wan have said that? Why did he say it? Was it defendable? Etc.
Yeah. It has been retconned at least twice on two different occasions now, possibly more, but just with the quick research I did.
How was it retconned?
Well, the first time was from the book Star Wars Aftermath, Empire's End. Apparently there's a prayer from the Wills.
Oh, no, not the Wills. Oh, it always comes back to the Wills.
I know. They always write in these sing-songy, like anytime people reference the Wills, they write in like sing-songy poetry, which I don't know where that comes from. But
yeah.
the prayer is, the truth in our soul is that nothing is true. The question of life is, what then do we do? God, I hate that.
That's
the burden is ours. Yeah. The penance we hew. The force binds us all from a certain point of view. So they were arguing, this article I was reading was arguing that it was a religious thing, that Obi-Wan was falling back on like a religious explanation for himself. This was before the Kenobi series came out. That's the second explanation,
I don't know if I believe the religious business here with the Wills. I know the Wills are thrown in just to answer anything that we can't answer, as a convenient escape from whatever the point of the topic is. But I don't know if Obi-Wan would choose to rely on that in that moment with Luke.
Well, there's never been reference to Obi-Wan paying attention to the Wills.
No, Yoda.
Being and Qui-Gon,
yes,
but not Obi-Wan. So, I don't know. That seemed like an easy explanation. And yeah, I mean, as a writer, maybe the author of that book was like, oh, that'd be a really clever way to tie it back. But I don't really buy it as a way for Obi-Wan to explain or excuse his explanation to Luke. That's a weak argument to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's weak. Why do you think he said it? In your heart of hearts, why do you think Obi-Wan chose to phrase it this way with Luke in that moment?
I have two answers, and I have the answer from before the Kenobi series existed.
Okay, let's go with that.
So before, I think it's because Obi-Wan and Yoda needed Luke or Leia to do something for them. They needed the Sith defeated, not just them, but the whole galaxy, right? They were the chosen children to to vindicate or, vanquish the galaxy. And they were afraid that knowing the truth would make it harder for Luke or Leia to do that.
And it would. And I agree.
Yeah, of course. I mean, even though in Empire Strikes Back, you see Luke's greatest fear is turning into Vader, like being dehumanized, being evil at the core. You see that in the cave, which we've talked about. But when he finds out in Return of the Jedi that they were basically asking him to commit patricide and that they were going to let him find out after he had done it.
Yeah.
So that to me sounds like they didn't want to mess up the potential. It was like serving a greater good.
Yeah,
They were willing to sacrifice Luke and Leia's potential mental health. and goodness knows the baggage that would come with killing your own father without knowing it was your father. It was very Greek mythology, but they were willing to allow the sacrifice of those two characters for the greater good. And I don't like that.
Well, no, what is your opinion after? Oh, I'm curious. I'm getting all this out of the way because I don't know that I know your answer on any of this. I know that me and you have casually thrown it about that he shouldn't have said that and he should have done that better, but we've never really got to the nitty gritty. What did the Kenobi series change for you?
I don't know if it really did change the motivation. I think they tried very hard to change the motivation. So now that it is, Obi-Wan really believed, Anakin said, I killed.
Yeah, true.
Vader said, I killed Anakin Skywalker.
Right.
You didn't, I did. And some people take that differently. I always have taken that to mean Anakin purposefully destroyed the parts of himself, or so he thought, that were good. Yeah. And not to absolve Obi-Wan. I feel like he was kind of throwing that in Obi-Wan's face.
Oh, 1,000%. I think it was very self-serving and kind of arrogant, which is par for the course here, but
in character.
In a way, it also absolved Obi-Wan from any guilt, which I don't think Anakin or Vader at that moment meant to do.
Yeah. I think you're right, yeah. And I think that allowed Obi-Wan to make a mental shift of, he is dead to me, so I can, process it that way. But that is not healthy, first of all.
No.
And then to explain to a child later, I mean, he's 18, whatever, young man.
Yeah.
The way he explains everything to Luke is just avoiding the real truth. But again, how could you tell a person the real truth? And that's where I soften on it, because when I think of how was Obi-Wan supposed to tell Luke what
his
real father was,
In my opinion, I don't think when they're having their initial meet and greet on Tatooine where he's invited into Obi-Wan's cave hut.
Yeah. Humble abode,
if you will, his vacation house in the sands of Tatooine. That was not a time to unleash anything on Luke.
Yeah.
And Obi-Wan, from his point of view, has kind of settled on what we've learned from the Kenobi series. Granted, we didn't have the Kenobi series when any of this happened. So he's had time to just settle on anything at this point without even bringing in the Kenobi series. I don't know that I would have told him. I don't know that I would have said any of that to him initially. And even so, shouldn't he, as a teacher in some fashion, allow Luke to find that out on his own? They probably weren't banking on Vader telling him.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes. Yeah, unfortunate that piece of information was revealed. But at the same time, in that revelation is what propelled everything anyway. So perhaps they didn't need to tell Luke in the first place. At least, like you said, it would have prevented what happened in the way that it happened from transpiring. I just don't know that there was a good way to tell him. Should the truth come out more plainly? Sure. But like, is a Force ghost even capable of that? Probably. Obi-Wan's Force ghost is, but
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't see how it could have happened anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, like, maybe the truth, you know, if you want to look at it as people are a collection of their lives, and as we change through experiences, we become more or less receptive to ideas or openness, you know. If he had told, and first of all, he had no time to tell Luke in A New Hope. He died within like a few hours of them meeting, basically.
Correct. Yes.
So there was no opportunity to really sit down and bridge that gap there. But Luke probably wouldn't have been ready to hear it until he had gone through everything up to Empire Strikes Back. And even that, it was extremely devastating. But he defaulted then after that into nothing at all that Obi-Wan and Yoda expected from Luke. They thought he was going to be willing to do this horrible thing they wanted him to do, but instead Luke chose passivity and to try to find the good in his father still, which Yoda and Obi-Wan had totally given up on, which with the Kenobi series, like with good reason.
We have to consider the motivation of any of this. And if you think about Obi-Wan, let's say he had told Luke the actual literal truth. Because what Obi-Wan said to Luke wasn't a lie. It wasn't a lie necessarily. It was, was it plainly spoken? No. Has Obi-Wan ever plainly spoken? Probably only to Anakin. Okay, so like...
And even then
it was still... you know, polished a little bit because he's f***ing Obi-Wan. And like Satine said, the collection of half-truths and hyperbole known as Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? She said it right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And she knew him better than most people, okay? And she knew him. She knew him when he was younger and not so stern in his ways, you know? Not stern, but like strict in his ways.
Yeah.
Settled in his ways. So the motivation of any of this was to confront Vader. Point blank, period. Right? Mm-hmm. For Luke to do this. Having just met Obi-Wan, and he gets the lightsaber, Obi-Wan's telling him about his father, how he fought in the Clone Wars and was a very good friend. Okay? All truths. Mm-hmm. What if Obi-Wan would have told Luke in that moment, by the way, this is what went down? Would Luke have even believed him? He just met this man.
Yeah.
It could have caused discourse. Maybe like, who the f*** are you walking in here telling me about my father? You know, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Like an angsty teenager who's being confronted with the weight of the galaxy in every sense.
Yeah. He's not ready for that.
No. And, you know, he wasn't told about Leia either.
Yeah, and they all knew about her too.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, Yoda really never even said anything about Leia up front either. He gave a half-truth riddle in the end that Luke had to piece together.
I know. What is wrong with these Jedi? Why can't they just say what they mean?
I don't know.
Oh my God.
Save so much time.
Seriously, if they would have, all of them, just had a normal conversation, we could have avoided all of this trouble.
And it started with Obi-Wan and Anakin. If they'd have just talked through this anyway.
It's true.
That's its own episode, but the therapy needed by both Obi-Wan and Anakin will be an upcoming episode. Okay, so Obi-Wan doesn't tell Luke that Vader is his true father. Is Anakin. So Luke goes into this trying to avenge his father, right? He was killed by Vader. So this is a noble thing that he's being positioned.
Yeah.
You will avenge the Jedi and myself and, whatever else Obi-Wan had positioned him for. And Luke's going into it much more courageous, I think. Because, when you're avenging something that was wronged or someone that was wronged, nothing can stop you because you're doing it for the right reason. So, again, to your point, Obi-Wan and Yoda needed him to do something. Whatever. But had Obi-Wan told him, would Luke have gone into it with the same? He'd have been doubt. There's a lot of self-doubt, questioning the Jedi, questioning Obi-Wan, Yoda, all of this stuff. He might have just dropped it all and, just went with Luke and Leia and Han and the whole group and fought for the rebellion and just never encountered any of it and avoided it.
Yeah.
So I'm actually glad that Obi-Wan didn't tell him.
Yeah, it would have definitely reset the course of the story. There might not have been a story. So, of course, it adds intrigue and it's layers that are more interesting. And especially to realize, as Luke, that the people you've been trusting all this time are kind of not really telling you everything you really need to know. It then adds a layer for the audience of wondering if Vader and the Emperor could change his mind then.
Right. I mean, from a film standpoint, that's the goal here, is
right,
the light and the dark. Like, who do you trust?
To make it believable that he could go either way,
Yeah. Yeah, but I think it's also necessary in the hero's journey to confront that which plagues you through your growth story. And that's what makes Luke so compelling in the end. Does it pivot off of that one line that Obi-Wan delivers? No. But it is an element in his story that should be considered.
Yeah, especially because Obi-Wan uses the phrase, he betrayed and murdered your father. Not he died, not, and that's just such a particular way of phrasing it that it's like, it's almost like, are you trying to put a seed of revenge in there? Because it's not quite what happened. I mean, okay, so I also want to ask you and dive into from a certain point of view. Is that just total, a thing Obi-Wan is telling himself so he can believe that what he did was the right thing? How do you feel about that phrasing particularly?
Well, I don't think he's wrong. I think he set it up. I don't think he's wrong in saying that from a certain point of view. I think, first of all, I think it's petty. Because you're right, Obi-Wan, from a certain point of view, but it's Luke's point of view that matters here. So take yourself out of it. This isn't about you and what the happened with Anakin. Maybe it is. But right now, it's about Luke. Okay? I think maybe Obi-Wan did not want to be wrong, but he didn't know how to tell Luke, and that was the only way he could tell him without being wrong and yet not also exposing the absolute truth.
Yeah.
There's some, what's the word? There's some goal in it.
Yeah. He has a motivation, I guess, or...
I would have been happier if Obi-Wan would have said, look, Luke, you had to find out on your own, and this was the only way to do it. That would have been truth.
Yeah.
That would have at least revealed his motivation a little more, instead of being like, oh, well, from a certain point of view, anything can exist. Yeah,
because I'm inclined to feel like there is truth and there are lies. And Mon Mothma kind of talks about that in her speech. Right? Of what is said and what is known to be true.
Yes. Oh, that's a good point.
And that's just, it's human nature, right? They always say the victor writes the history, that kind of thing. So, of course, you are going to have two perspectives. Say there's two people in an argument or in a conflict, let's say. Each person is coming with their own perspective. So, yeah, okay, there's a certain point of view. But, did Anakin Skywalker murder Anakin Skywalker?
Not physically.
No. Not actually.
Metaphorically, he disposed of the old self. Okay?
Right, exactly. They should have said, like, metaphorically, yes, it was true. Like, if you're Luke, you'd have been like, fuck your stupid metaphors.
Yeah.
Like, I would have just liked the actual truth, but
would he have? Would Luke have liked the actual truth? He thinks he might have because he feels betrayed in this moment. He feels
right.
led on in this moment. But I think that's where Obi-Wan's
Yeah.
experience and knowledge and wisdom comes in with, I mean, yeah, from a certain point of view, psych,
Well,
got him. We got him. It's not right. None of it's right, but
oh my gosh. Well, and, you know, like Yoda also is, so apparently there's missing dialogue from Yoda and Luke's conversation from Return of the Jedi where Yoda's about to die.
oh, right.
And it was cut out. So again, can we really take it as part of the argument? Because it was cut out for a reason. It was left on the cutting room floor for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But it was that Yoda told Luke that Obi-Wan had always wanted to tell Luke the truth, but Yoda wouldn't let him.
Oh, now that throws a bit of a wrench in it because I could see Yoda not wanting Obi-Wan to tell him. Because Yoda, after all, had more of a goal than, they were all Bail. Also, what about aunt and uncle? They never told him.
I know.
I know. There's more complicity in this lack of telling Luke than just Obi-Wan.
There's also this implication in the Kenobi series that, first of all, Obi-Wan had never heard of Darth Vader being alive in the galaxy.
Right.
Because he knew that Anakin's Sith name was Vader. He saw the footage in the Jedi Temple. I think it was in the Jedi Temple, right? Where he's like looking up recordings or something like that.
Yeah, it was on that hologram.
Yeah, which is in the Emperor's... It was in Palpatine's chamber. So does
Yeah.
that mean the Jedi could see... Like, did they have a listening device or something in Palpatine's office?
I'm sure he had cameras everywhere because he was a paranoid freak.
Probably.
He had to have eyes on everything.
Yeah. Yes, it's true. So, okay. So, Obi-Wan knew that. He knew Anakin was Vader. You said that Thrawn knew Anakin was Vader.
Correct. Sensed. He put the pieces together. He never had verbal confirmation. But
Yeah.
he's one of those
Yes,
thinker, observer
He
types.
could feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we know Reva knew. Does Owen and Beru, do they know? Does Bail Organa know? He knows Anakin is dead. And he even says to Obi-Wan in the Kenobi series, Anakin's gone. Like, move on, basically.
Again, though, gone is a very loose word.
Yeah. I mean, they all knew he turned. Right? Well, at least Bail knew. Who knew what Owen and Beru knew?
That's what I'm
They
saying.
didn't really say anything. It's like a small group of people, and you're not quite sure who knows what, but they all know something bad happened.
Yeah.
And they all chose to not tell the
Correct.
truth to any of the children.
No.
Either of the children. Not like all
Well,
of them.
Obi-Wan did get down on Leia's eye level and tell her who her mother was and who her father was via characteristics. Remember?
Yeah.
And that she's a product of the best of those two. And
Yeah.
that's Obi-Wan also telling Leia without telling Leia.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So it falls in line with like all of this. I don't know. I can see both angles of like why Obi-Wan and Yoda and the aunt and uncle and all the other accessories in all this didn't tell Luke. But I can also see why if he had said something, I think it would have changed the trajectory slightly.
Yes. Totally.
Because how do you just come out and say that? You don't.
And not fill the recipient with fear, like completely. Like it would have just terrified Luke, and then he would have been paralyzed. I think.
Yeah.
Especially when he was younger. You know, when
Let's also not forget that they're trying to avoid Luke becoming Anakin. in all of this, sending him into the cave.
Yes.
There, all of the challenges, and there's just
It gave
so
him
much.
It really gave him the opportunity to be his own man without the fear hanging over him of, am I predestined to fall like my father?
Absolutely.
Granted, that all changes after Empire Strikes Back, but at least to that point, Luke had the ability to make his own choices of the kind of person he wanted to be.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you. Like, if they had told him that sooner, that probably would not have been the case. He would have just felt that burden his whole life.
Again, though, did Obi-Wan need to say it the way he did? No. There were other ways of phrasing it. I guess the question is, why did George Lucas choose to write that line for this character? Has he ever said?
I'm sure I have. There was in my VHS copies, they had very in-depth interviews with George Lucas before them, and I used to watch them all the time, but I haven't been able to watch
my
them
VHS
for a really
copies
long
had
time.
those. Yeah, I remember.
They're probably on YouTube at this point now, so I could probably look them up, but I do remember him talking about certain things about Vader in particular, but I don't remember if he went into why Obi-Wan chose from a certain point of view. I've always loved the line too in Return of the Jedi when Yoda's passed away and Luke goes back outside and Obi-Wan appears in the fog.
Yeah.
And Luke just very casually says, "You told me Vader betrayed and murdered my father." Like, so not emotional.
Yeah, right.
Like,
Totally.
like, I think I would have been a little bit madder.
Well...
The inflection in his voice is like someone listing off a grocery list. It's just like very benign.
You sent me out to get milk, and I brought...
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It's funny.
Precisely. That's exactly it.
Why did you put peanuts down when you really wanted almonds?
I can't believe it, Obi-Wan.
How could
Why
you
would
do
you
this?
do that?
Yeah. Oh my god.
Oh, that's fun.
I just think, at the end of the day, he probably should have just said, "You had to find out on your own. I couldn't have told you. End of the controversy."
Yeah. It's sad that people have taken it to mean that Obi-Wan was a terrible person.
Yeah,
and
I don't think that.
master. And yeah, I don't think that either. I mean, what would you do if you had watched your best friend
Oh, it's
or
too much.
like someone you kind of consider a son or a brother, like watch this trajectory? How would you then tell their child? Put yourself in Obi-Wan's shoes for a second. I would have had to consult like a psychologist.
Yeah.
Been like, what is the best way forward? I need some help, because that is a very difficult conversation to initiate. How would you do it? It seems almost impossible. So that's why I don't hold it against Obi-Wan, really.
Truly, I think the fear of Luke turning into Anakin and perhaps eventually a Sith, you know, was very real. And you had to very, very, very lightly tread around this topic.
Yeah.
And I think Obi-Wan, being the wise man that he is, even in Force Ghost form, treaded very lightly and still did not lie to the boy. You know, I'm sure that, I bet you any money, Yoda told him what to say. It just seems like a Yoda line, doesn't it?
Yeah, it feels like it. Yeah, that kind of line that's not really telling you anything.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
it's basically, it's like the equivalent of, if you don't know, I'm not going to tell you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, if you can't figure it out on your own, then I'm not telling you. It's
You
like,
don't deserve
that's
to
not
know.
helpful.
Yeah, off.
Exactly.
But
Yeah,
at least he didn't do that. I mean, at least Obi-Wan didn't do that. He didn't treat Luke like he was stupid. That's one thing.
No.
He always trusted Luke to come to whatever decision he wanted to, even though there were signs there of like hastiness and wanting to rush to the, go save people, which you got to think through. But if he thought too much, if they'd have told him about Vader, that would have just overwhelmed his thought process and would have changed everything. He would have questioned. Yeah. I'm convinced if Obi-Wan would have told him the straight truth and very early on, before any of this happened, like Return of the Jedi happened and most of Empire Strikes Back, he would have gotten stuck in a thought loop of, did my father do what he thought was right? Why did he do it? And then we have to bring up the he was trying to save Padme in the end with his own selfish means and the Palpatine. How do you start? Once you open that door, you got to walk through it and tell the whole story that Palpatine did the whole, grooming him from a young age, turning him against the Order, all of Obi-Wan and the Order's faults for raising him, this, that, Ahsoka, and this, that, and the other thing. It's a whole mess.
Yeah. It really is.
There isn't anyone really to back up Obi-Wan's story. There aren't any other witnesses to say what he's saying is the truth. Where the is Ahsoka? Nobody knows. Not Obi-Wan.
Right, I know. Right? Like, Ahsoka's just non-existent, and then everyone else is dead, and the only other person who was there was the Emperor, and can you trust a word out of his mouth? No, of course not. So, yeah.
And who knew that Luke would end up in a room with the Emperor? Had he known all this stuff, he could have asked the Emperor, and the Emperor could have fed him 1,001 lies, and we'd be closer to saving the galaxy than before. So it probably was a good thing that it wasn't straight up given.
Yeah. Yeah. And lucky for us, Luke is more Padme than Anakin. God. Was able to look for the good in people instead of letting his fear take control. That's a whole nother thing of like, he had a stable family life and stuff, which we've talked about with regards to Anakin and how, the fear of his mother and all of that just terrible plays into it. So yeah, it's fun that there's this element of Star Wars where you can kind of go round and round with some subjects and not really necessarily fall on a solution, but it's a fun thing to play around with because it is so complex and layered.
And I think everyone's opinion on what they think about that line is completely valid.
Yeah. Yes, I think so too.
It's just one of those things like where there is no right or wrong answer. Could it have been done with more tact? Absolutely. All of them could have used a little more tact. But that's not why we're here.
No.
That's not why we love Star Wars.
It's true. And it's all, everyone's going to interpret it from their own life experiences, and it's going to all be from their certain point of view. So,
there it is. Our question to you is pretty straightforward for this episode. What are your thoughts on that line? Obi-Wan saying to Luke, well, from a certain point of view, he told him the truth about his father. How do you feel?
Yes. Honest. This is your chance to vent your feelings.
Yes. And no matter how long it is, we'll choose one or two or whatever we get. We'll read them all. But we'll read one or two on our next episode at the end. So please chime in. Let us know.
And our next episode is going to be a recap or review of Tales of the Underworld. We have not watched it yet because we were in an Andor cyclone.
Yes.
Yeah, and for some reason they decided to release those at the same time, so we definitely have not seen it yet. So we will watch all the episodes and then do a recap episode for that. Not next week, but the week after. We're back to our every other week schedule. So we'll see you back then.
And thank you for joining us here this week on the Most Things Kenobi podcast. If you would like to support the podcast by becoming a patron, head over to the Most Things Kenobi Patreon. We are currently revamping our 3 available tiers and are offering new and exciting content, and we do hope you'll join us. For those of you who are already subscribed, we appreciate every single one of you and thank you for your support. You can also interact with us on our social media platforms, Tumblr, Instagram, YouTube, and Threads, and don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast player. If you enjoy our podcast, feel free to rate us on Spotify and Apple. And if you need just one place to find all of these, head over to mostthingskenobi.com.
So until next time, my space twin, may the force be with you.
Always.